Welcome, dear listeners, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Recap Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. The city of Thomasville sits in the northeast corner of Davidson County, between High Point and Lexington, and is home to about 27,000 residents. Established in 1857, Thomasville is commonly referred to as Chair City, after its old landmark, the Big Chair, which symbolizes the regional furniture industry. Since 1921, 8 Thomasville police officers have been killed in the line of duty, but one death in particular has been a source of whispers and rumors for 75 years. The death of Patrolman George Arnold Kemp has never been solved. Kemp, 38, was found dead on the morning of December 7th, 1942, in the bottom of the elevator shaft in the First National Bank building. Kemp preferred to be called by his middle name, Arnold. On the evening of December 6, 1942, Arnold Kemp and his partner, W.C. Lofton, were making their normal nightly rounds of downtown Thomasville. The men reported for duty at 8 p.m., and the early hours of their patrol had been routine and uneventful. Midnight marked the one-year anniversary since the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Shortly after 2 a.m., the two officers checked the First National Bank building and found the doors securely locked. The bank had several offices in the upper floors, and it wasn't unusual for the doors to be open late at night. But if the officers found them unlocked after midnight, then they would take a look around and make sure the building was safe. At 4 a.m., Lofton took their patrol car for their nightly patrol on the outskirts of the area, while Kemp continued on foot patrol. They agreed to meet back at 4:45 a.m. so that Kemp could relieve the desk officer at the station. When Lofton returned for their meeting spot, Kemp was nowhere to be found. It wasn't like Arnold to be late. Concerned, Lofton began a cursory search for his missing partner. At 5:30, Lofton checked the bank and found that it was unlocked and deserted. By 7 a.m., the department ramped up the search. All 8 remaining members of the small police force were now looking for Kemp in wells, open fields, and under overpasses. At 7:17 a.m., the bank building was once again checked, and this time the doors were securely locked. By mid-morning, the snow had begun to fall as members of the Davidson County Sheriff's Office and the State Highway Patrol had also joined the search. Around 3:10 p.m., R.L. Pope, the mayor of Thomasville, and also the executive vice president of the bank, suggested looking in the pit underneath the elevator shaft. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of Kemp. Arnold Kemp was born in Carroll County in Southern Virginia on February 24, 1904. He lived most of his life in Mount Airy, where he met his wife, Nellie Rose. Together they had 2 children, James and William. In 1939, the Kemp family moved to Thomasville, North Carolina, in hopes of a better life and more job opportunities. Over the next 3 years, Kemp became very well respected in the community, and in March of 1942, Chief E.R. Richardson asked him to join the Thomasville Police Department. Arnold Kemp would be buried at White Plains Baptist Church Cemetery, just outside of Mount Airy, 9 months later. Photos of the crime scene show the patrolman's body lying on his back, leaning slightly to his right side, with his head resting against the north wall of the elevator shaft. His glasses remain in place, and his weapon is in his holster. His hat is a little off, but the rest of his uniform is pristine. implying that Kemp did not struggle before his death. The only wound to his body was a 3-inch long fracture over his right ear. It was originally believed that Kemp's death was accidental, but after closer inspection, that was found to be physically impossible. The elevator was the type that will not operate if the door is open. Investigators found no evidence of damage to the elevator's mechanism, and it ran without failure for 6 hours through the morning before his body was found. So how had the door been open at the time of Kemp's accident? Also, if it's to be believed that Kemp accidentally fell into the open shaft, the car would have had to have been on the upper floor of the 2-story building. The bottom of the pit where Kemp was found is only 41 inches below the first floor of the building. 2 separate coroners concluded that a fall from this distance would not have been sufficient to cause the fracture that was found on Kemp's skull. They further determined that if he had fallen from one of the upper floors, that his shoulders would have likely been shattered. They weren't. Kemp's wrists were bruised, and his shoulders had blood on them, as if someone had been dragging his body. There were no fingerprints found at the scene, leading to the assumption that prints may have been wiped clean. The coroner's office determined the death to be a homicide and ruled the cause of death as, quote, a blow to the back of the head by a blunt instrument in the hands of an unknown person or persons, end quote. Rumors began circulating among the local residents even before the body was buried. The leading theory was that Kemp had walked in on some of the area's most prominent residents, who were known to host late-night gambling parties in the bank. The lobby of the bank building was not very large. To the right is a wooden staircase leading to the upper floors, and further past the stairs on the right is the old elevator where Kemp's body was discovered. 2 heavily secured doors sealed off the bank after hours, so the front doors of the building were accessible to any of the upper floor tenants. The prestigious tenants of the building included physicians, dentists, and even the city's attorney. A social club also met in one of the rooms on the top floor. Local residents knew that illicit activities went on in the bank after hours. Poker games, womanizing, and the consumption of alcohol, despite Thomasville being a dry city in a dry county. Even though everyone knew who participated in these late-night soirees, hell, their cars were parked in the parking lot right outside. No one talked about it. 2 days before his death, Kemp had begun to tell his wife about an encounter that he had at work involving some of Thomasville's elite crowd. He seemed uncharacteristically worried, but then his kids came into the room, and Arnold never got to finish telling his wife the story. Before the coroner's findings had been released, Mayor Pope expressed his opinion to the local newspapers that the death was accidental. Chief Richardson could not see how that was possible and brought the State Bureau of Investigation in on the case. It appeared that the SBI never believed that the death was accidental, but couldn't break through Thomasville's code of silence. A few years later, Chief Richardson was forced to resign following the Thomasville safe scandal, when thousands of dollars in bail bond money was found missing from the department's locked safe. Mayor Pope promoted Paul Shore to replace Richardson. Shore had also been with the department when Kemp was killed. One of Shore's first official acts was to reassure the public that Kemp's death was an accident, an affirmation that he maintained until he retired in 1980, saying, quote, Thomasville has no unsolved murders, end quote. In 1952, the FBI arrested Ernest Myers of Thomasville for possession of slot machines. Myers owned a garage in town, and the slot machines were found hidden in the back room. During the investigation, Myers alleged that he had purchased the machines from then-Officer Paul Shore several years before. A witness verified that claim, testifying that he had seen Myers, Shore, and another man unloading the machines into Myers' garage about 10 years prior, which would have put it around the time frame of Kemp's death. How much did Mayor Pope know of Kemp's death? During the morning of the search, hours before Kemp's body was found, Pope allegedly made a comment to some of his employees at the bank that wouldn't it be something if the officer's body was found in the pit under the elevator. Later, it was Pope who suggested to Chief Richardson to look under the elevator. Did he know Arnold Kemp was there all along? An officer who retired within the last 10 years from the Thomasville Police Department said off the record, but was published in writing, that it was the consensus among officers within the department that Kemp's death was indeed a murder, but that the, quote, principal players of that crime were of such community importance so as to bring pressure to bear on the Thomasville Police Department and altered the course of the death investigation through applied pressure based on job retention or promises of personal advancement or reward, end quote. This mystery has just reached its 75th anniversary, and as each year goes by, the likelihood that anyone will come forward with new information diminishes. Thomasville City Hall occupies the building at 10 Salem Street, which used to be the First National Bank, where Kemp was found. Although several hauntings have been reported over the years, we're not going to cover those in this podcast. This was a man whose sworn duty was to protect and serve the citizens of Thomasville. Officer Kemp deserves to be remembered and honored for his service and his sacrifice. All slain police officers deserve this basic human dignity. Every year in May, a memorial service is held to honor the 8 Thomasville police officers that have been killed in the line of duty. Chief J.E. Taylor died of gunfire on April 16, 1921. Officer David H. Clodfelter was struck by a train and died June 15, 1923. Officer T.L. Reddick died of gunfire on February 6, 1928. Officer George Arnold Kemp of assault, December 7, 1942. Constable Robert George Kennedy was struck by a vehicle and died June 29, 1946. Constable John McChristian Bodenheimer died of a vehicle crash July 2, 1946. And Patrolman Dennis Franklin Spennett died of gunfire, along with Patrolman Robert Glenn Crawford on January 8, 1977. To learn more about the mysterious death of Officer Kemp, check out Linda Duck Tenenbaum and Barry McGee's Ghost Tales from the North Carolina Piedmont. You can also check out the Officer Down Memorial page at odmp.org, along with thedispatch.com, journalnow.com, and findagrave.com. This episode was researched and written by Jeff Cochran and was produced by me, Dan Sellers. You can find more information on Jeff's work at adarkerworld.com. And you can find everything we're up to at our company, Wreak Havoc Productions, at wreakhavocproductions.com. You can find Carolina Haints on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And please consider contributing to our endeavors at patreon.com/wreakhavoc. We've been fortunate to be able to bring you this podcast without any advertisements. However, each episode of this show costs money to produce and publish. Whether you give a one-time gift or a continuing small monthly contribution, anything you can do will be greatly appreciated and will go toward keeping this show going. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Tune in then to hear more about the things that go bump in the night.